Alexander Carter wasn't supposed to be in Barcelona that afternoon. His name had just been printed in glossy conference programs across Milan. Keynote speaker, Alexander Carter, visionary architect of the future. For 2 days, he had spoken about glass towers, sustainable skylines, and the importance of beauty in a collapsing world. Strangers had shaken his hand, toasted him with champagne, and whispered his name into microphones. And yet, as the final discussion ended, Alexander did something wildly out of character. He closed his notes, ignored a dinner invitation from a mayor, and walked out of the hall. He booked the earliest flight back home. No message to his assistant. No warning to the staff. Why? Because that morning, Lucas had sent him a drawing. It was simple: a crooked house with 3 windows, a sun with sunglasses, and a stick figure with the word "me" written above it. At the bottom, in bright crayon, Lucas had scrawled, "When are you coming back, Daddy?" The words dug under Alexander's ribs like a knife. So, for once, Alexander Carter didn't follow the plan. He followed the ache in his chest. When he stepped into the mansion, the silence felt different. Usually, it was sterile and heavy, the silence of a hotel lobby. This time, there was something beneath it. A vibration, a sound, laughter. Not from the television, not from staff gossip, not the brittle laugh of dinner guests. This was childlike, unguarded, filled with oxygen. A laugh that made the marble walls sound less like walls. Alexander stopped. He froze mid-step, listening as if to a foreign language. The sound came from the kitchen. He walked slowly, past a row of abstract paintings he'd bought at auction but never truly liked, past the formal dining room no one had ever dined in, and stopped at the doorway. What he saw rooted him in place. Lucas was sitting in the marble sink, legs submerged in warm, soapy water. Bubbles floated in the air like fragile planets. His cheeks were red from giggling, his curls damp, his tiny hands clapping at each bubble that burst. Beside him stood Elena Morales, the maid, the woman he had hired only 3 months earlier. She wasn't tall, she wasn't glamorous, but there was something in the way she leaned over Lucas, something in her presence that filled the room. Sleeves rolled, hair tied back, humming softly, an old lullaby, Spanish with an African lilt. It carried warmth, like a memory sneaking back into a house that had forgotten such things. Lucas squealed. More bubbles, Mama Elena. Alexander's stomach clenched. Mama Elena. That word. The one Lucas had almost forgotten. The one Alexander hadn't heard in years. Not since the night everything changed. Elena dipped her hands into the suds and blew through her palms, releasing another flurry of bubbles. Anything for my little prince. It was then that Lucas noticed his father. His eyes widened, but instead of leaping into Alexander's arms, he pressed himself closer to Elena. Alexander's briefcase slid from his hand to the floor with a dull thud. "Elena," he said, his voice lower than usual. She turned, startled. "Mr. Carter, we weren't expecting you until tomorrow. I changed plans." "I see." Her cheeks flushed. She lifted Lucas from the sink, wrapping him in a blue towel decorated with rockets. The boy clung to her, resting his face against her shoulder. Alexander stepped further into the kitchen. For the first time in a long time, he looked, really looked. The table was set, not with the polished silverware the staff usually used, but with things that were clearly meant for a child. A cartoon tablecloth, a divided plate, a colorful plastic cup with a curved straw. A stack of flashcards lay neatly on the counter, next to a storybook with a dragon on the cover. It felt like someone else's home. "You two seem to have established quite the routine," Alexander said. His voice was sharper than he intended. Elena lowered her eyes. "Children need stability. Don't tell me what my son needs." The words came out harsh, almost like a bark. Elena flinched. Lucas frowned. His small voice cut the air. "Don't yell at Mommy Elena." Alexander froze. Mommy Elena. The title felt like both a gift and a theft. His late wife had barely been remembered, and now his son had given that sacred word away to a maid. Elena whispered softly, "He's tired, little prince. Go find your pajamas. I'll be there soon." Lucas looked at his father, uncertain, then ran upstairs, but not before kissing Elena on the cheek. The gesture struck Alexander harder than any conference debate. When the boy was gone, the kitchen air tightened. "How long have you been working here?" Alexander asked. 3 months. "In that time, you've done what I haven't managed in 4 years." Her lips parted, then closed. "My son loves you," Alexander said. Her eyes glistened. "The boy loves you too, sir. He just doesn't know how to show it. Because you never showed him how." He swallowed. His gaze drifted to the bubbles still floating on the sink water. "I'll begin looking for a replacement tomorrow." Her face fell. "Please don't." But her plea was cut short by a scream from upstairs. "Mommy, Elena, I can't find my pajamas." Not a tantrum, not frustration. A cry that ripped through the house like a wound reopening. Elena darted off, Alexander close behind. They found Lucas sitting on the floor, surrounded by clothes, sobbing with fear. "I thought you left," he choked, clinging to Elena as she knelt beside him. Like the others. Alexander felt his chest cave in. Like the others. 6 nannies in a year, each dismissed without thought. Each one ripping security out of his son's world. "Hush, my prince," Elena whispered, stroking Lucas's curls. "I'm here. I won't go anywhere." Alexander knelt too, awkward, clumsy. "Elena isn't leaving. Not yet. Not until we find a solution." Elena looked at him in surprise. Later, they returned to the kitchen. Dinner was simple, star-shaped pasta with tomato sauce. But to Lucas, it was a banquet. Elena cut each piece small, slipping in little jokes, making him giggle with every bite. She poured him juice in his special cup. She wiped his chin when sauce dripped. Alexander sat across the table, hands folded, silent. He watched the way Lucas's face lit up at Elena's smallest gestures. Watched his son's eyes sparkle. Watched warmth flood into a home he had thought irretrievably cold. "Is it good, Lucas?" Elena asked. "Yes, Mama Elena. It's delicious." Alexander tightened his jaw. The word rang in his head again. After dinner, he tried. "Would you like me to read you a story tonight, son?" Lucas hesitated. His eyes shifted to Elena, then back. "If you want to. But Mama Elena reads better." Alexander said nothing. When Lucas was finally asleep, Alexander retreated to his study. He poured himself a drink, though he barely touched it. He stared at photographs, his wife's smile, Lucas as a newborn, himself in younger days, standing stiffly in a suit. He saw a man who had built skyscrapers, but not a home. In the silence of that room, Alexander Carter, millionaire, architect, visionary, realized the unshakable truth. He didn't know his son, but Elena did, and that terrified him more than anything else. A week passed since Alexander had promised Elena would not leave. 7 long days of quiet observation. He returned from the office earlier than usual, not out of lessening ambition, but out of something stranger, curiosity. He found himself drifting through his own home like a ghost, drawn not by architecture magazines or contracts, but by the sound of his son's laughter spilling through the walls. Each morning, he lingered outside the study door where Elena had improvised a small classroom for Lucas. Flashcards in bright colors, crayons scattered across the table, storybooks stacked in a neat pile. "Let's see, little prince," Elena's voice cooed, warm and melodic. "What letter is this?" Lucas squirmed happily in his chair, toast crumbs clinging to his pajamas. "That's M. Like my name, Lucas." Elena giggled softly. "Not quite, darling. M like Mama." "Mama Elena," Lucas announced proudly, grinning with every tooth he had. Alexander clenched his jaw from behind the half-closed door. That word again. Piercing, unavoidable. Elena never corrected him, but she never encouraged it either. "And this one," she continued, lifting another card. Lucas tilted his head. "P. That's right. P for Papa. Your father works very hard to take care of you. He is a very special man." Alexander's breath caught. Even after he had threatened to fire her, even after the sharp words in the kitchen, Elena had never once undermined him. She spoke of him with respect, even tenderness, in front of his son. And yet, his own boy still asked questions that made Alexander's heart sting. "Mommy Elena, why doesn't Daddy eat breakfast with me?" Elena hesitated. "Your father has very important work, but I am sure he would love to join us one day." Before she could add more, the sound of high heels clicked against the marble foyer, a sound Alexander had known since childhood. His mother, Alexander, her voice, sharp as ever, filled the house. Margaret Carter entered the study with the regal air of someone who had never once apologized for a thing in her life. At 60, she remained an imposing figure, silver hair in a perfectly arranged chignon, a tailored Chanel dress, eyes like frost. Elena stiffened. She adjusted her uniform instinctively, murmuring to Lucas, "Sweetheart, keep eating your breakfast." But Lucas, delighted, leaped up. "Grandma." He ran into Margaret's arms before proudly tugging her toward Elena. "This is Mama Elena. She teaches me letters." The room froze. Margaret's smile vanished. Her eyes moved coldly from Lucas's shining face to Elena's flushed one, to the crayon drawings taped carelessly on the fridge. "So, you are the woman my grandson cannot stop mentioning," she said, each word dipped in disdain. "A servant who allows herself to be called mother." Elena lowered her head, her voice trembling. "Madam, I never intended." Silence. The word cracked through the room like a whip. A servant must know her place. Lucas blinked, confusion clouding his little face. And then, anger. Small fists clenched. "Don't yell at Mama Elena." The room went still. Alexander, who had been listening from the doorway, stepped forward at once. "Lucas," he said gently, kneeling. "Grandma isn't yelling. She's just worried." "Why?" Lucas asked stubbornly, clutching Elena's hand. "Because she loves you, and she wants to make sure you are cared for." "But I am cared for," the boy insisted. "Mama Elena makes me happy." The words, innocent yet merciless, hung in the air like a judgment. Alexander met his mother's gaze. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. The accusation in her eyes was deafening. "Why can a stranger give your son what you cannot?" The doorbell rang, shattering the tension. Elena excused herself quickly, grateful for escape. But the silence that followed between mother and son was heavier than the marble floors beneath their feet. Days passed with unease. Margaret's presence lingered in the air like smoke, even after she returned to her own estate. Lucas clung tighter to Elena, as if afraid she might disappear at any moment. And then came the park. It was a golden morning, sunlight spilling through the trees, children running in circles on the playground. Lucas laughed, chasing falling leaves, while Elena watched with a smile. For once, life looked almost normal. Until he stopped. He clutched his chest. His breath grew shallow. His lips pale. Elena's heart dropped. She was at his side instantly. "Lucas? What is it?" I can't breathe." Panic surged through her. She scooped him into her arms and ran into the street, waving frantically until a taxi screeched to a halt. "To the hospital. Please, fast." Inside the cab, Lucas gasped for air, tears streaking down his cheeks. Elena held him tight, whispering, "I'm here, my prince. I won't let go. Just breathe, darling. Just breathe." By the time Alexander received the call, his blood had already turned to ice. He sped through traffic, barely hearing the doctor's first words when he arrived: "Severe asthma attack." In the emergency room, Lucas lay with an oxygen mask strapped to his face, small chest rising and falling in shallow waves. Elena sat beside him, uniform soaked with sweat and tears, her hand never leaving his. "Daddy," Lucas rasped weakly, reaching out. Alexander was at his side in a heartbeat, kneeling, clutching that small hand. "I'm here, son. I'm here." The doctor explained briskly. "He has asthma. The attack was serious, but the medication is working. We'll need a long-term management plan." Asthma. The word echoed in Alexander's mind. He glanced at Elena. "How long has he had this?" She bit her lip. "I noticed some things. Night coughing, shortness of breath while playing. I thought it was a cold. I didn't want to worry you. Didn't want to bother me." His voice cracked louder than he intended. Her head lowered in shame. Alexander's chest constricted with guilt. She noticed. "I did not." The doctor intervened gently. "It's common to miss early signs. What matters now is that we begin proper treatment." For hours, Alexander sat watching. Lucas improved with each passing breath, but Alexander noticed something undeniable. Every moment of comfort, every song, every soothing stroke of the boy's hair came not from him, but from Elena. At one point, Lucas whispered, "Mama Elena, don't leave me." "Never," she promised, kissing his forehead. "I'll always be here." Alexander's heart ached with gratitude and terror. Gratitude that she had saved his son's life. Terror that his own mother would demand her removal. Terror that Elena herself might one day leave. That night, Lucas was discharged. Elena insisted on staying awake, checking his breathing every 2 hours as instructed. At 3 a.m., Alexander found her in the boy's room, head tilted in exhaustion, still sitting upright with a hand resting on Lucas's blanket. "Elena," he whispered. She startled awake, immediately checking Lucas's chest before sighing with relief. "He's steady now? Thank God." Alexander gestured to the chair. "Sleep. I'll watch him." "You? But you've taught me what to look for. I trust you've taught me enough." Their eyes met, and for the first time, her gaze didn't drop. Later, when Lucas drifted off again, Alexander sat in the dim light, listening to the rhythm of his son's breathing. For years, he had believed control and money could solve anything. Yet here, in the quiet of his child's bedroom, he realized he was powerless. Powerless without her. His phone buzzed. A message from his assistant. "The Madrid offer expires tonight. Regional director. Double salary." Madrid. His dream. His escape. But Madrid meant pulling Lucas away from his doctors. Away from the only woman who had managed to mend his son's heart. Away from the fragile miracle beginning to grow in that house. Lucas stirred. His small voice whispered in the dark, "Daddy? Why do you look sad when you think about Mommy Elena?" Alexander's throat tightened. The boy touched his father's cheek with tiny hands. "Because when you think about her, your face looks like mine when I can't breathe." Alexander pressed his forehead to his son's. Out of the mouths of children. Lucas's voice was steady. "Daddy, why don't you just marry her? Then she'll never leave." Alexander nearly laughed, nearly wept. "It's not that simple, little prince." "Why not? You love her. She loves you. I love both of you. Isn't that enough?" Alexander had no answer. But somewhere in the silence, he began to wonder if maybe, just maybe it was. Lucas recovered quickly. Children often do. Within days, his color returned. His giggles echoed once more through the halls, and his appetite for star-shaped pasta was back in full force. But the scare lingered like smoke after a fire. Alexander worked from home more often, partly to keep an eye on his son, partly to watch Elena. Not to supervise her. No, he knew by now she needed no supervision. But because he could not help himself. He found himself lingering in doorways, observing the easy way she moved through rooms that had once felt sterile. The Carter mansion had always been a monument. Clean lines, cold elegance, polished surfaces. It was impressive, but lifeless. Now there were crayons on the table, drawings taped to cabinets, tiny socks in the laundry basket. For the first time in years, the house felt inhabited. Still, Alexander struggled. Every time Lucas shouted Mama Elena, something inside him twisted. It was gratitude. It was jealousy. It was guilt. And then there was Margaret. His mother had not forgotten her first encounter with Elena, nor had she forgiven. "Alexander," she said one afternoon, arriving unannounced as she always did. "We need to talk." They sat in the sitting room, sunlight spilling through tall windows. Margaret, immaculate as always, sipped her tea as if preparing for a duel. "That woman," she began, "has taken liberties no servant should." Alexander sighed. "Mother, do not interrupt. She is undermining you. She saved Lucas's life." Margaret's jaw tightened. "She is replacing his mother." Alexander set his cup down, hard. "His mother is dead." For a moment, silence cut between them. Margaret recovered quickly. "Precisely why you must guard his memory. Not allow a maid to trample it." Alexander leaned back, exhausted. "Lucas needs love, not theory. He needs someone who will stay." Margaret's eyes narrowed. "And what of you? Do you intend to marry this woman?" The question startled him. He hadn't spoken it aloud yet, not even to himself. "I don't know," he admitted. "Then dismiss her before the boy becomes more attached. The longer you wait, the harder the wound will be when she inevitably leaves." "She hasn't left. Not yet." Her words stayed with him long after she departed. That evening, Alexander walked past Lucas's room and stopped. The door was half open. Inside, Elena sat on the floor with Lucas curled against her. She was reading a story, her voice weaving dragons and knights into the air. Lucas's eyelids drooped, but he clung to every word. Alexander watched them quietly, unseen. "My son feels safe. Because of her." Later, when Elena stepped out, she found Alexander waiting. "You should rest," she whispered. "So should you," he replied. They stood in the dim hallway, silence thick between them. "Elena," he said finally, "why do you stay?" She blinked. "Because he needs me. And if he didn't?" She hesitated, then met his eyes. "I'd still stay." Something unspoken passed between them then, dangerous, undeniable. The next morning, Margaret returned. Lucas, thrilled to see her, ran forward. Grandma, Mama Elena taught me a new song. Margaret froze. Mama Elena? Lucas nodded proudly. She's my mama now. The words hit like a blade. Margaret's face hardened. Lucas, darling, you mustn't say such things. She is not your mother. She is, the boy insisted, stamping his little foot. She loves me. You don't know? Alexander stepped in quickly. Mother. But Lucas cut him off. I want her to stay forever. Elena knelt, placing a calming hand on his shoulder. Sweetheart, Grandma isn't angry. She just wants you to be happy. I am happy. Because of you, Lucas said fiercely. Margaret's lips pressed into a thin line. She turned to Alexander. Do you hear him? This is what you've allowed. Confusion. Attachment to a servant. You are failing him. Elena's eyes brimmed, but she said nothing. Alexander felt something snap inside him. Enough, he said firmly. Elena is part of this family whether you approve or not. Margaret stared, wounded pride flashing in her eyes. So it is true. You intend to replace your wife with her. Not replace, Alexander said, voice shaking. Heal. For the first time in years, Margaret had no response. She left in silence. That night, Alexander couldn't sleep. He paced his study, the Madrid offer glowing on his laptop screen. Escape. Prestige. A way to silence gossip, to avoid his mother's judgment. But also exile. Leaving meant tearing Lucas from his doctors, from the only woman who had mended his broken laughter. Alexander closed the laptop. For once, ambition could wait. The following days unfolded like fragile glass, beautiful, but liable to shatter. Lucas clung tighter to Elena, sometimes refusing to sleep unless she sat beside him. He had begun to dream again, dreams of dragons, heroes, mothers who stayed. Alexander joined them at dinner now. He listened as Elena told Lucas small stories to coax him into eating vegetables. He watched his son's smile return, a smile he hadn't seen since before tragedy struck. But the more warmth he witnessed, the more Alexander felt like an intruder in his own house. Elena had stepped into a role he had abandoned, and the boy had crowned her with a title Alexander could never take back, Mama. One evening, as Lucas slept peacefully, Alexander stood outside his son's room, listening to his steady breathing. He thought of Elena's promise in the hospital, I'll always be here. For the first time in years, Alexander realized he wanted that promise for himself too. The Madrid offer still sat unopened in Alexander's inbox. Every day, his assistant called to remind him. Every day, he said, tomorrow. But tomorrow never came. Instead, he found himself orbiting Elena and Lucas like a satellite, never too close, but never able to pull away. He would linger in doorways, half listening to her voice weaving bedtime stories. He would pass by the kitchen, catching sight of Lucas perched on the counter while Elena prepared dinner, the boy laughing at something silly she whispered. The mansion, once a mausoleum of cold glass and polished stone, had become something terrifyingly unfamiliar. It had become a home. Alexander was both grateful and afraid. One evening, after Lucas had fallen asleep, Alexander found Elena in the living room, kneeling on the floor to gather scattered Lego bricks. The lamplight caught strands of her hair that had escaped from her scarf. She hummed softly to herself, the same lullaby he had first heard in the kitchen weeks ago. Elena, he said quietly. She looked up, startled. Mr. Carter. No, he interrupted. Call me Alexander. Her lips parted, but no word came. He walked closer, heart hammering harder than during any business deal of his life. There's something you should know. I was offered a position in Madrid. Regional director. Twice the salary. A chance to rebuild everything I once thought I wanted. Her face fell, but she said nothing. I turned it down, Alexander continued, voice trembling. Because I realized everything I need is here. In this house. With Lucas, and with you. Elena's hands stilled on the Legos. Sir, please. Alexander, he corrected gently. Alexander, she whispered. He sat beside her, close enough to feel the warmth of her shoulder. I love you, Elena Morales. I love the way you care for my son, as if he were your own. I love your patience, your kindness, the way you've brought laughter back into this house. Tears welled in her eyes. Don't. Please don't say that. Why not? Because I am just a maid. You are not just anything, he said firmly. You are the woman who makes me want to live again. Her tears spilled freely. If your mother hears. My mother doesn't decide my heart. At that moment, a small voice interrupted them. Dad. They turned to see Lucas standing at the stairs in his pajamas, rubbing his eyes. Propose to her. Make Mama Elena my real mom. Elena covered her face, laughing through tears. Alexander chuckled too, though his chest ached with emotion. He knelt on one knee, heart pounding. Elena Morales, will you marry me? Not for Lucas. Not out of duty, but because I cannot imagine my life without you. Elena gasped, her hand trembling against her lips. Lucas bounced excitedly. Say yes, Mama Elena. Say yes. Elena looked at the boy, then at Alexander. Yes, she whispered. Lucas squealed with joy as Alexander rose and pulled her into an embrace. From the shadows of the hallway, Margaret watched, her usually cold eyes glistening. She turned away before they could see. The wedding was held not in a cathedral, but in the Carter garden. White roses, golden lights, a string quartet. Guests gathered quietly, as if witnessing something sacred. Lucas, dressed in a tiny suit, carried the rings with pride. He told every guest he met, "Today Mama Elena becomes my real mom." When Elena walked down the aisle in a simple white gown, Alexander's breath caught. She looked radiant, not like a maid, not like an employee, but like the woman she was always meant to be. At the altar, Alexander took her hands. His voice shook as he said, I vow to love and protect you, just as you have loved and protected Lucas. I vow to stay by your side, and his, forever. Elena's reply came through tears. And I vow to love you both, to make this house a home, to stay when others leave, to laugh when days are dark. Applause followed, soft but sincere. Lucas jumped into their arms, wrapping them both in a hug. From the edge of the garden, Margaret dabbed at her eyes. When the ceremony ended, she approached Elena, her voice trembling. I was wrong, she admitted. I thought you were here to take something from us. But today I see you've given us what we could not give ourselves. Elena shook her head quickly. Madam, I never wanted to replace anyone. I only wanted Lucas to be happy. Margaret placed a hand on her shoulder. And he is. Because of you. Thank you, Elena. Thank you for bringing laughter back into this family. Elena embraced her, overwhelmed. For the first time in years, 3 generations of the Carter family stood united. 8 months later, the house smelled of basil and vanilla. Elena, now Elena Carter, was preparing Lucas's birthday party. She supervised decorations while Margaret hung balloons with surprising enthusiasm. Lucas, in his superhero costume, darted into the kitchen. Mommy, are the guests here yet? Not yet, little prince, she said, resting a hand on her belly. Alexander entered, dressed neatly for the party, kissing her on the cheek. He slid a hand to her stomach. Have you told him yet? Elena smiled. Lucas, you're going to be a big brother. It's a girl. Lucas's eyes widened. A sister? I'll take care of her. They laughed together, and Alexander kissed his wife deeply. Have you chosen a name? Margaret asked from the doorway. We like Sophia, Elena said softly. Lucas jumped. Princess Sophia. But braver. The house filled with laughter. For the first time, Alexander realized he no longer lived in a monument of glass and marble. He lived in a home. And sometimes, the most beautiful structures are not the ones we design. They are the ones we dare to love. Not all legacies are carved in stone. Some are whispered in bedtime stories, drawn in crayons, and carried in the laughter of children. 8 months after the wedding, the Carter mansion no longer resembled the place Alexander once returned to in silence. The cold marble floors now echoed with small footsteps, the air filled with the scent of cooking, the walls decorated with Lucas's drawings. It was the morning of Lucas's 5th birthday. Elena stood in the kitchen, directing Carmen, the new maid, on where to place the cake, a magnificent castle of sugar and cream. Margaret fussed in the garden, stringing up decorations with surprising zeal for a woman who once thought balloons beneath her dignity. Lucas, wearing his superhero costume, darted in. His inhaler dangled from a strap across his chest, his proud badge of courage. Mommy, is everyone here yet? Not yet, little prince, Elena said, her hand unconsciously resting on the swell of her belly. Alexander entered then, adjusting his cufflinks. He kissed Elena softly and scooped Lucas into his arms. Happy birthday, my hero. Lucas giggled. Careful, Dad. You'll squish my cape. Alexander set him down and ruffled his curls. I have something to tell you. Lucas's eyes sparkled. What? You're going to be a big brother. The boy gasped. A sister? A daughter, Alexander confirmed. Lucas jumped in excitement, nearly tripping over his cape. I'll protect her. I'll teach her to use my inhaler if she ever needs it. Elena laughed, wiping at her eyes. Carmen, smiling from the counter, asked, Have you chosen a name? We've been thinking Sophia, Elena said softly. Like Princess Sophia. Lucas shouted. But ours will be braver. They all laughed, the sound filling every corner of the once-empty house. Guests arrived soon after. Neighbors, colleagues, Lucas's little friends from school. The garden glowed with golden lights strung between trees. Children ran through the grass, their laughter carrying across the evening air. Margaret presided over the games like a general, ensuring no child was left without a balloon or prize. Carmen served snacks with motherly ease. Alexander stood at the edge of the garden, watching. His chest swelled with something unfamiliar. Not pride, not the sterile pride of awards and accolades. Something warmer, something softer. Alexander, Elena said, coming up beside him. She slipped her hand into his. Are you happy? He looked at her, then at Lucas racing across the lawn, cape flying, inhaler bouncing against his chest. Happier than I thought possible. She smiled. Do you ever think about before? He was quiet a moment. Every day, but not with regret. With gratitude. Because it brought me here. Elena kissed his cheek. Then we are both exactly where we should be. As the sun dipped low, guests gathered around the cake. Candles flickered. Everyone sang. Lucas closed his eyes, scrunching his face in concentration, and blew them out in one breath. Cheers erupted. Elena leaned down. What did you wish for, my prince? Lucas grinned, cheeks glowing in the candlelight. That our family always stays together. Me, Dad, Mama, and my baby sister. Alexander bent down, hugging his son tightly. That wish has already come true. Lucas's laughter rang out, pure and free. Weeks later, the house filled with the cries of a newborn. Sophia Carter entered the world on a warm spring night, lungs strong, tiny fists clenched as if ready to fight the world. Alexander wept as he held her. Wept in a way he hadn't since he was a boy. Elena, exhausted but radiant, watched him with tears in her own eyes. She's perfect, he whispered. She has your eyes, Elena said softly. Margaret, standing nearby, placed a trembling hand on Alexander's shoulder. For once, there was no sharpness in her voice. You've built many things, my son. But this is your greatest work. Alexander smiled faintly. Not mine alone. Elena reached for Sophia, cradling her against her chest. Lucas peeked over the edge of the bed, eyes wide with awe. She's so small, he whispered. But don't worry, Mama. I'll protect her. Elena stroked his hair. I know you will, my prince. That night, as the house settled into silence, Alexander stood on the balcony with his newborn daughter in his arms. The city stretched beyond, towers he himself had designed glittering in the distance. Once, those towers had been his legacy, proof of his genius, proof of his control. Now, looking down at Sophia's tiny face, he knew better. Legacy wasn't concrete and steel. Legacy was laughter echoing in a kitchen. It was star-shaped pasta, Lego bricks scattered on the floor, a boy's fierce loyalty to the woman who saved him, and a grandmother learning to love again. It was choosing love over ambition, home over exile, presence over pride. Welcome home, Sophia, he whispered to his daughter. You've been waited for. Behind him, Elena's voice floated from the doorway. Come inside. She'll catch cold. He turned, smiling. Coming. And as he stepped back into the warm glow of his home, Alexander Carter realized he had finally built the most enduring structure of his life. Not a skyscraper, but a family.